I have a riddle for you. What is something that we absolutely cannot live without? It covers approximately 40% of the total land surface on this planet, which is about 60 million square kilometers. For most countries in Africa, Latin America, Southeast Asia, it's the biggest source of employment, it's the biggest driver for economic growth, but it's also something that keeps about 500 million people in poverty, and it's the biggest source of environmental destruction. What is it? It's agriculture. It's our food-producing system. And I would like to talk with you about that food-producing system, the sheer size of it, the scale of it, the reason why it's such a mess and why it's so difficult to change it, but also what you can do to really make a difference. And I'm going to need your help. I'm going to count on you because I will be looking for 4 responses from you. Whoa. Really? Yes. Can I count on you? All right, so that is whoa. Really? Yes. I'll be giving you a little nudge, so you know. We'll start with the whoa. So I'll be throwing you some big numbers, so you know what's coming to you. Okay, let's talk about food. Don't you just love it? I mean, the smell and taste of fresh bread, a juicy steak, a glass of wine or whiskey, that morning cup of coffee, or that piece of chocolate. That's it. Not yet. I'll be giving you the nudge. That piece of chocolate. Food is embedded in our culture. It's over dinner when families reunite after a busy day. It's over dinner where most business deals are being done. I mean, the very word company comes from the late Latin word companio, which means breaking bread together. It's, in fact, in my opinion, the biggest moment where most love affairs either start or end. Speaking about love affairs, there are about 7.45 billion people on this planet. Every day, 360,000 babies are being born, and every day about 155,000 people die. And so that means that every day, 210,000 people are more on this earth. That's, by the way, 3 times the size of this city, Gouda, every day. Experts from the United Nations have estimated that by the year 2050, which is only 34 years from now, we'll be with 9.5 billion people on this planet, which is 2 billion people more, and that number scares me. In that same period of time, by the time that these kids are 33, 34 years old, our global economy will have tripled. It will be 3 times bigger as it is today, and that means that more people than ever will have more money to spend than ever. And since most of these people are in what we call the developing countries, what these people will do with that money is buy a mobile phone, yes, buy a car and a home, but they will change their diet. They will want to have more food, they will want to have better food, they want to have more varied food, safer food, which means it's less polluted, and they will want to have meat. Already the demand for meat is increasing very rapidly, and particularly meat is a nasty one. Besides the animal welfare issues, you can imagine it's not a very efficient way of producing food. For every kilo of meat we're going to get out of it, we need to put in more food to begin with. And so, as a result, more people than ever, having more money to spend than ever, and they will want to have better food and more food, the demand for food will simply explode. In that same period of time, it's estimated we need 70% more food than we're producing today. In the next 34 years, we need to produce more food than the last 8,000 years combined. There's more. Wait for my signal. Some of you might be thinking, wow, this sector is booming, I better get some shares. But here's the problem. It's the most unsustainable sector by far. And again, the numbers are staggering. It's the biggest driver for deforestation. Every minute, we're losing 23 hectares of forest because of agriculture. Since 1990, which was my last year in high school, it feels like yesterday, we lost 130 million hectares of forest due to agriculture. 70% of all the fresh water is being used in agriculture. That means lakes are disappearing, groundwater levels are disappearing, we're leaving behind deserts. From the 600 million farmers, 500 of them are living below poverty levels. They are unable to get themselves out of it. It's one of the biggest changes for climate change, or drivers for climate change. It's the biggest driver for child labor, slavery, malnutrition, illiteracy, which is people cannot read or write. And this is not just happening in one sector, let's say the sector where we produce corn or rice or coffee. That will be easy, then come on guys, fix it. But it turns out that everywhere where we produce food on any scale, this is the outcome. Every time. It's every time poverty, it's every time environmental degradation, every time child labor or deforestation. It seems like everything that we don't want happens in agriculture on the largest scale imaginable. Whoa. Thank you very much. That's awesome. I find it fascinating. I mean, for me, it doesn't make any sense. If something is so important, if we cannot live without, if it is economically so important, if we only need more of it, I would imagine that if the production and trade of it would actually lead to well-being, prosperity, economic growth, but that's not happening. It's on the contrary. So why is that happening? What's the cause of that? Why is that happening? Let me ask you a question. Who of you ever played the game Monopoly? That's interesting. I would say everybody. Fantastic. What's the outcome of this game? One wins and the rest goes bankrupt. The other day I had somebody said, yeah, you go to jail, which is also true, I guess. Now, another question. What happens if you play this game 10 times? What's 10 times the outcome? Same. One wins, the rest loses. Would it make a difference if you play it 100 times? No. Why? How come? How come that's every time the outcome of the game? Well, because of the rules of the game, silly. Yes. Because of the rules of the game. If you play the game according to the rules, that's the outcome. But here it is. If every time that we produce food on any scale, deforestation, poverty, child labor, all of these things that we don't want is the outcome, could it be that that's because we're playing the food game? Could it be that because of the rules of the game, the way the game has been set up, this is the outcome? Sometimes I play Monopoly with my kids, and sometimes they lose. And then particularly my son, he can start throwing the dice, flip the board, he doesn't want to play anymore. Does it help if I say, well, here's a little bit of money? Will that change the outcome of the game? Does it help if I say, come here, son, and I give him a hug and some encouraging word and I give him some tips? Will that change the outcome of the game? No, one will win, the rest loses. If we don't like that outcome, how do you change it? Well, then you have to change the rules of the game. You have to play a different game. So the same with agriculture. If we don't like the outcome, we need to change the rules of the game. Something to think about. That's quite deep there. Wow, good thought. So I just shared with you something that took me 35 years to figure out. And I just give it away. Yes, for 35 years I've been following a passion to figure out why we as humans have this talent to make a mess out of things and to think that it's completely normal, to create super failing systems and we think we cannot do nothing about them because we're doing it ourselves. And this is how it started for me. I was 10 years old and I was standing in the living room of my mother's apartment and I just saw this on television. I still have the goosebumps when I look at it. Big vessels dumping nuclear waste in steel drums in the ocean. The heroes of Greenpeace, because that's what they were, trying to stop them, and you saw what happened. The protests had to stop, the dumping continued. In total, they dumped for thousands and thousands and thousands of tons in the ocean. It went on for decades. I was 10 years old and I was thinking, How on earth can we think that this is any type of a solution? Dumping nuclear waste in steel drums in the ocean, I mean, don't they know that it will rust? Which it did. They went back, everything is gone. It's all part of our ecosystem now, it's part of our food chain. They can still measure the higher level of radioactivity. How come that we think that this is normal? I looked outside, I expected protests, I expected uprisings, but nothing. People were walking the streets, cars were driving by, it was a normal day. And this started a hunger in me. I wanted to understand, how on earth can we build this? How on earth do we think this is normal? And how do you change it? I spent my whole career in sustainability. I studied it, I'm working it, I'm now a serial entrepreneur. I got several companies with one central question. Why is this happening and how can you change it? And I'm here to say that I've got some good news. Yeah. I figured it out. I know now. Took me a while, but I know now why this is happening. Why in agriculture that's happening, but also why that in other situations that's happening. And we're figuring out how to change it. Would you like to know what it is? Okay, good. So it turns out that system failure, because that's what it is, right? There's a whole system failing. It's not happening by itself. You really have to mess things up in order to make that happen. In fact, 3 things need to happen at the same time for failing systems like this to happen. The first one is, what are markets looking for? That sounds very complex. Let me explain. With markets, I don't just mean consumers like you and me, but I mean the hundreds of thousands of companies that are buying and selling food products every day. What are they looking for? Are they looking for that specialty product, that quality, and are they willing to pay for it? Is that what they're looking for? Or are they looking for the cheapest stuff available? We don't care where it comes from. We don't care how it is produced. And unfortunately, for the largest part of our food products, this is the case. We really don't care where it comes from, nor how it is produced. And don't blame them. Because how many of you today have ever thought about where your cotton comes from in the clothes that you're wearing? How many of you today or ever thinks about who picks your coffee? Whether that's Carlos, George, or Nien. Do you ever think about it? Most of us don't. And so we have markets that don't care and just go for the lowest price. But this in itself is bad, but not bad enough. This would be simple. The second force is in what kind of context are we producing our food? I mean, here in the European Union, we give a lot of money to protect our farmers. In fact, it's the biggest cost item on the European budget. It's the subsidy to our farmers, direct, indirect. We do everything to help them. Over there, in Africa and Latin America and Southeast Asia, that's not the case. There is no training, there's no education, they don't get what they want, they cannot get finance to invest. There are no effective laws to help the children or protect the children or the workers. There's very little. The combination of these 2 forces, markets that go for the cheapest price in a failing context, is devastating. Because it means that we're not creating a situation where it's survival of the fittest, but it's survival of the most unsustainable. If you use child labor, you're cheaper. You get the business. If you cut down the rainforest for cheap expansion of your land, fantastic, you get the contract. That's how we have defined success on a global level. The third force makes it even more painful, which is, are there alternatives? Can these farmers get out? Can they do something else? And of course, as you can imagine, for most farmers, this is it. They cannot go to other economies. It's this little plot of land they're dependent upon for their survival. And these 3 things together, markets going for the lowest price in a failing context without alternatives, create markets of poverty. Desperate farmers competing with each other for even lower prices just to survive. The difficulty is there's no one really to blame. Nobody did it. We are all doing it. You as consumers are doing it. It's the trade in the industry that's doing it. It's governments that are doing it. We're all in the system. As the US saying, blame the game, don't blame the players. We are all part of the same game, playing according to the rules, and the outcome is fixed. And so in a situation like this, there are no easy solutions. I wish there were, otherwise we would have solved it by now. In fact, we have tried. For the last 15 years, we have spent $2.75 trillion on what we call developing aid. 1 trillion is a 1 with 12 zeros. And according to reports from the World Bank and Harvard and the IMF, the result of that is very little to none. We have spent it on schools and training, and we have given money to the governments, and we've done all kinds of charity work, but the results are very little. Why? Because it's the equivalent of me giving a little bit of money to my son while he's losing the game. Very little to none of this money is actually being spent to changing the rules of the game, to change the game that we're playing. We're just trying to fight the symptoms. And that's why we're losing this game. Really? Yes, really. It's really. That's it. So, isn't there anything we can do about it? Well, yes, there is. And it turns out that there are 3 things that we need to do. And it sounds obvious, but it's not simple. So the first thing is that if you want to change the rules of the game, of course, you need to get the players around the table. And so step number 1 is get the players around the table, but only those who are really interested in changing it. Don't work with anybody else who is just there to slow it down or for their own interest. Get only the coalition of the willing around the table and create a shared vision. It sounds very simple, but the question is, what type of outcome would we like? What is the quality that we should be recognizing and rewarding in our value chains? What is the type of environmental protection that we do want? What is the type of income that we think is fair for our farmers? It's these type of simple questions. And together we create a shared vision of what it is that should be the outcome of the game. Step 1. Step 2 is, how do we get there? What are the barriers that need to be solved? What are the actions that we need to do? How are we learning together? And, very important, who should be doing what? What is the role of the industry? What is the role of these local governments? What is the role of donors and NGOs? And then, thirdly, how do we measure progress and keep each other accountable so that together we make sure that we're playing a different game? It sounds simple, doesn't it? But it is a far cry from how we have spent the last 50 years building schools and doing charity work, doing massive amount of projects. But none of it went into changing the game. So, this is where we are now. Perhaps you're wondering, we're doing this, by the way, more and more, and we're learning better also how to do it. And perhaps you're wondering, isn't there anything that we can do? Well, yes, there is. The first job that you have is to care, to have an opinion about what you're buying and what you're putting in your mouth. Where does it come from? Is it quality? How is it produced? And stay away from the cheap stuff, because the price that we are paying is enormous. Teach your children about the importance of food, where it comes from, and how the whole world needs to collaborate almost to make sure that he gets his breakfast. And look at your political party. Do they have a vision on how food should be produced? Not just here in the Netherlands, but globally. Do they have a vision? And to the industry and the governments and the NGOs who are in this room, but I'm hoping for those who are watching this video, and I hope that there will be many, I say this. Playing Monopoly is good fun, but playing the food game is devastating and deathly. We need to start looking beyond our short-term self-interest. We need to understand that we're part of a game, and we need to start working together to change the outcome of the game. Because at the end, the faith of this farmer, the faith of the whole food industry, and the faith of 9.5 billion people is the same. And it's not just me who's saying this, because I'm pretty sure that the people here in Gouda agree with me. Do you agree? Yes. Yes. All right. You're awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.